Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to revisit the catalog of The Residents, one of the strangest, weirdest out there bands that you're ever going to hear. Now, I prefer the band's maybe first dozen years or so. So basically from the early 70s up until about 83 or so. So that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm not discounting any of the later stuff. I was just not able to connect with it in the same way that I was able to for the stuff for the first, 10 or 12 years. Okay, here's the thing about the Residents. Very little. I mean, even 50 years after they debuted, there's still so little known about the Residents. You sort of have an idea of who the members were, but essentially all the members of the Residents, they're shrouded in mystery. Nobody knows who they are. In fact, obviously in the pre-internet days, we never knew. And you sort of figured it out in a way. I don't want to ruin that mystery because I love it. I mean, like I said, we know who it is, but I still love the fact that it's mysterious, that we really don't know that much about this band at all. But here's my take on the Residents before I get into their catalog. The Residents, when they first started out, they just had these aspirations, these big ideas, yet they weren't skilled enough to perform it the way that they heard it in their heads, the way that they imagined it. The way that I think about that is, imagine, you've got these great ideas to build, a skyscraper. You write everything down and you've got everything planned out and you know exactly what you want, but the only skill you have at building anything is maybe Lego blocks or Lincoln Logs or Tinker Toys. I felt that the Residents, their aspirations, their ideas, everything was up here. And their skill kept, with each release, kept getting better and better and better. And I think that by the 90s, their musical skills had really caught up with their musical ideas. In this period, I'll probably mention that some albums are a little bit more ramshackle than others. Now let's get into the music here. There is a CD here called Before They Were the Residents, They Were the Delta Nudes. I have to cover because there's stuff there. This is really, really early recordings. Again, maybe I'm just making up stories here, but it sounds like these guys, we want to be in a band. We want to write songs. We want to do this. And they just didn't, they just weren't good musicians. But they made noise with whatever they had, and they created something quite interesting. Now, the early stuff is not my favorite, including this Delta Nudes. It's a very important historical artifact. Now, the transition from going from the Delta Nudes to the Residents, but before their first album, is captured on this album called A Nickel If Your Dick's This Big. And this consists of the Warner Brothers album. And for anyone who doesn't know what the Warner Brothers album is, they recorded, their music at home on 4 tracks or whatever. And they put together a tape and they sent it to Warner Brothers as hoping to get signed. And Warner Brothers obviously refused it because it was very primitive and very out there. But the Residents didn't have the name of the artist that sent it to them. So they sent the tape back to the band and they addressed it to Residents. And that's how they got the name The Residents. Now, this 2-CD set contains that Warner Brothers, and it contains a lot of early recordings and early live performances. It is a 2-CD set, and it is ultimately just fab beyond fab. It's just wonderful. Now, in 1972, they released a single called Santa Dog. And limited edition versions of that go for a lot of money now. 1974, they released their first album, and this is what really caught the attention of people. It's called Meet the Residents, and as you can tell, it's a parody of the Beatles. And it doesn't sound anything like the Beatles, man, but you can tell that they're getting better than they were on the previous recordings. They're learning to express themselves more through these instruments that they haven't quite mastered, but you don't have to be just a a stellar musician in order to get your thoughts and your feelings across. And it caught everybody's attention, obviously, with the cover, but also because of the music, because it's just so darn weird and crazy. But in a sense, that's where the charm is, because you don't know where they're coming from. It's just crazy. And this is a 2 CD version. It's got loads of bonus stuff. I think it has the stereo and mono version of the album there, and lots of other stuff. Really, really fantastic. Now, the next album is called The Residents Present The Third Reich and Roll, and that is an album. Basically, it's 2 long songs. One was on side 1, one was on side 2 of the album. It came out in 1976, I think. And it's kind of there, where they were musically, getting even better at expressing themselves musically, but they were doing like weird this long medley of cover versions. Now, for you Beatles fans, check out, they had released a single called Beyond the Valley of the Day in the Life. And it's the Residents play the Beatles play the Residents or something. And what that song is, it's essentially just samples of Beatles things put together in this medley that is so absolutely frightening. It's scarier than Revolution Number 9. It's actual real Beatles samples, either from interviews or from records, little tiny clips of music, and it's fascinating. It really, really is. And then on that same EP, they also did their version of the Beatles song Flying. So that's really, really just a great release. Their next album was called Fingerprints, and that came out in 1977. This, again, shows them just advancing musically and these ideas coming together and then being able to express them in their own unique way. And when I say unique, that is just fucking weird stuff. I'm sorry to say the word weird, but it's just absolutely crazy, mental, wonderful though, because the songs are catchy. It's almost like people from an insane asylum creating children's songs, and it's wild. And here I am, like I said, I'm a pop kid. And a lot of people, when they listen to the Residents, they come at it from different angles. Some people love the sort of strange, weird sounds of, let's say, for example, Captain Beefheart, Frank Zappa, and some other experimental and avant-garde groups. And I'm not really into all that kind of stuff, but I love the Residents because I hear these melodies, I hear these ideas, and it's just fascinating, and it's wonderful and exciting. Now, the Residents have created a lot of false stories over the years. One of them was the album Not Available. Now, they claim that this album was recorded in 1974. Well, if you heard Fingerprints from 1977, you'll know that this is even better produced and better written and better performed than Fingerprints was. So this album, I believe, was actually 1977. I don't think this was really 1974. This might be my favorite Residents album. I love this. It's got so many cool things going on. Their ideas were coming fast and furious. They sounded like the Residents. I mean, especially beginning with Fingerprints. They had their own unique sound. On Meet the Residents and Third Rock and Roll, I believe that they were still finding that sound because, their talents weren't quite reaching their ideas. But by this time, it was really coming together, and I love this album so much. But believe it or not, I have actually 3 copies of it. Now, this version here is probably what most people would want. This is the 2 CD version. It's got loads of bonus material on that here. This is the version that originally came out on the ESD label, Eastside Digital. I think it was the first time on CD. Now, this is the version that came out on MVD. And when MVD put this out, it was actually like 11 minutes longer. A couple of the songs were unedited from the original version, so it was a longer album with some slightly longer songs. 1978, they put out the Duckstab and Buster and Glenn EPs together on one disc here. This is the Residents in pop mode. shorter songs, catchier songs. They were actually getting a lot of press by this time. Here is the expanded edition with loads of bonus material there. And again, when I say pop mode, it's not pop like anything you've ever heard. Just weird beyond weird, absolutely crazy, odd, but oddly beautiful as well. I absolutely love it. Now, the next album they put out, they always have these great concepts. One of them was, let's put an album together that told the story of a day in the life of an Eskimo. And that's what the album Eskimo is about. There are no lyrics in the song. There's chanting. I mean, it's closer to a New Age album in some respects, but it's very, very strange, unlike anything that they've put out, but that's what makes it wonderful. I mean, you can't underestimate the majesty of this band. And here is the album plus a bonus disc there. This tends to be a lot of people's favorite. By the way, I also have an MVD version of it. I don't know why I have another version, but I do. But it's just because I love them. The next album was the one that I really, really, really got into them on. Now, I had heard about the Residents for years, and I tried, I think it was 78, 79, I tried to get into them with a compilation album that I found at Licorice Pizza when I went shopping. And it was a UK compilation, so I thought, ooh, yeah, I was thinking it might be, punk or post-punk, power pop. I didn't know. I just knew the Residents, and they just had weird album covers, and I was finally going to get to hear them, so I spent my allowance, bought it. No way, Jose. I was not ready for it. I was probably 14, 15 years old. Not my brain was not ready to accept it. But there were some songs that were pretty memorable. Chew gum gum, chew gum, chew gum, chew gum gum, it's just incredible stuff. I know that sounds weird. So anyway, in 1980, out comes the commercial album, and what the commercial album is 20 songs, all 1 minute long. And the whole idea was you can play them once, and they're of the average length of a commercial, or you can play them 3 times in a row, and it would be the average length for a pop single, a commercial pop single. But whatever the concept, again, just this album has appearances from Andy Partridge on it, Lena Lovitch on it. It's just unique and wonderful. Some really beautiful melodies. When you get past the weird, you can hear these hooks and melodies and stuff. This is a 2 CD version, and it's got loads of material there. Now, of course, the Residents had to have another angle. They had to have another concept, so they decided to make Mark of the Mole, which was the first in the Mole trilogy. And this was a concept album that told the tale of the moles who are driven out of their homes by floods, and they have to go live with these creatures called the Chubs. And this sort of talks about them integrating and fighting and whatever else goes on. This was a limited edition one that I think Mute put out, but this is the first part of the Mole trilogy. But while you're waiting for the second part of the Mole trilogy, they did release Intermission, which was music that was actually played during the intermission of the live performance of Mark of the Mole. Now, in 1982, they put out an album called Tunes of Two Cities, which is tied with Not Available as my favorite Residents album. This is chiefly instrumental, and there's and it shows you the different music that comes out of each culture between the moles and the Chubs. So you're going to have a mole song, which is sort of kind of really experimental avant-garde, followed by the Chubs, who are far more happy and joyful, but it's still a weird, happy, joyful. So it's showing you the music of each of these cultures, alternating. So moles, Chubs, etc. But I love this album. It is so absolutely wonderful. It's weird, but it's melodic. Beautiful musical passages and melodies. Now, they never came out with part 3 of the Mole trilogy. They did come out with part 4, which was supposedly by a band called The Big Bubble, which were children of moles and Chubs. Trust me. I mean, you read about it online. Or you can get the Mole box. And this contains Mark of the Mole, Intermission, Tunes of Two Cities, Big Bubble, and different live performances of the Mole Show. And that is really, really wonderful. Now, the Residents always had songs on like compilations or, usually on Ralph Records, things that didn't make their albums. So they put out an album called Residue. Now, this Residue 2 came out, and this contains a lot of the songs from Residue, but it also goes a little bit further than that as well. And so I think this is a great, great, great collection, because some of their stuff that didn't make the albums was really, really good. And you definitely need to check that out. Now, on their label, Ralph Records, they had a duo by the name of Ronaldo and the Loaf. And they were kind of kooky British version of the Residents. So they decided to make an album together, and that's called Tidal and Limbo. And that is, like I said, it's the Residents and Ronaldo and the Loaf. And the Resident stuff is great. Now, in 1984, everyone's waiting for part 3 of the Mole trilogy, because part 4 still hadn't come out. But the Residents finally finished a movie that they'd been working on for years called Whatever Happened to Vileness Fats, or it could be Villainous Fats, I'm not sure. But this has that soundtrack, plus it has the soundtrack to a movie they did in 1985 called The Census Taker. It wasn't their movie, but they did the soundtrack. And anyone who's a Saturday Night Live fan, you'll see in the movie The Census Taker, that's a picture of Garrett Morris. Here is another version of that. This was the MVD version. That's kind of it. When they went into, let's say God in Three Persons and Freak Show and Midway and Wormwood and Gingerbread Man and stuff, all that stuff's really fascinating, but it just wasn't hitting me the right way. I think that technology had finally caught up with them and their ideas, and they just kept creating this great, wonderful music and offering all this stuff, but I just wasn't connecting with it like I was in the early days. But I did want to show you 2 compilations here. Here's one called Daydream Believer. This originally came out on their fan club called UWeb, which was like Uncle Willie's Eyeball Buddies. And then it got reissued, and this has some cool, rare stuff. One of my favorite Resident songs on here is called From the Plains to Mexico. This is the studio version, because there is a live version out there that got released. Studio version was only on a 7-inch, I believe, and I think it came with a book, but that's available there, and that's why I own that. Then there's also a 4-CD set called 80 Aching Orphans. And this is a compilation in the book package that covers their entire career up until that point. And look at all those tracks there. You're going to get the early stuff, mid-period, late period, and really a wonderful collection. Anyway, that is it. I decided I am going to try to put together a medley featuring some music from these. Prepare to be either weirded out or go, hey, they sound totally different than what I expected. I might check them out. Sit back, relax, give this a listen, and I will see you on the other side.
Let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock.
Here I come, Constantinople. Here I come, Constantinople. I am coming, Constantinople. Here I come.
Choo choo gum choo gum gum choo 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 gum choo gum gum choo 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 gum choo gum gum choo choo. Choo choo gum choo gum gum choo.
Smelly tongues look just as they felt. Smelly tongues look just as they felt. Smelly tongues look just as they felt. Smelly tongues.
Spot the rot, they tell the time while feeding him some say. Spot the rot, oh spot the rot, and then you'll be okay. Spot the rot, oh spot.
rode up on a red bicycle and she had red hair.
Bach is dead. Bach is dead. Bach is dead. Bach is dead.
We are simple, you are simple, life is simple too. We are simple, you are simple, life is simple too.
Or do posies just bloom for the feel of a May? Or do posies just bloom for the feel of a May? Investing space without a
Santa dogs at Jesus' feet, Santa dogs at Jesus' feet, Santa dogs at Jesus' feet. There's no presence in the future. In the future.
This is a man's world. But it wouldn't be nothing without a woman or a girl.
Anyway, that's it. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I hope that this at least inspires you to go and listen to the Residents. I know I didn't do them justice, but this was, I guess it was just an exercise in seeing if maybe I can get somebody to listen to them, because I've been a fan for many, many years, of going back to the early 80s. And hopefully maybe you might find them interesting too. Thank you again for your time. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.